Over 40% of the world's people live in federal countries, countries that include the United States of America, Mexico, and Germany. Federalism is about shared rule and self-rule, and about democracy. A big challenge for a number of federal countries is accommodating diverse peoples within a single country. Federalism provides them with a way of meeting that challenge.
Hello, I'm Bob Ray, and we're in New Delhi, the capital of India. India is a country of breathtaking diversity. There are over 1 billion people living here. 18 official languages, hundreds of dialects, all the major religions of the world. And yet, despite its diversity and for all of its great geographic size, India is one single unified country. How do they do it? Well, part of the answer is because India is a federal country.
Like many other modern countries, India was created out of a colonial past, its territory defined by the British Empire. In 1947, the vast Indian subcontinent was as complex as it was diverse. The country consisted of several British provinces and 600 princely states. Independence was a dramatic event.
At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
For the founders of the country, the unity and integrity of India itself was at stake. A constitution adopted 2 years after independence has remained the keystone of the Indian Federation.
There was never any doubt or apprehension that India would not be a federation. So it was just natural that the constitutional fathers would adopt this principle, and it was there. There was hardly any debate whether India should be a federation or not. It was adopted.
The Constitution created 14 states and 6 union territories based largely on colonial boundaries and princely states. A few years later, India began reorganizing its states, redrawing borders to reflect linguistic and cultural homelands. The process has continued, and today there are 28 states in the Federation. The 3 newest ones were created as recently as 2000. Every state has the right to determine its own language policy. Here in the southern state of Tamil Nadu, Tamil is spoken, and the official business of government is conducted in Tamil.
The Constitution provides for a formula under which every state can have its own official language, and of course Hindi is the national language.
We have a 3-language formula: the English, the Hindi and the regional language.
The state of Karnataka chose to adopt its historic name to express its particular cultural identity. Karnataka is also the home of the Kannada language. But there are many minorities within this state, and a number of languages are used here.
So these are the Kannada papers: Malayalam, Tamil, Hindi, Urdu and English.
As far as religious and linguistic minorities are concerned, the Constitution also took note of their presence in large numbers in different states, and so in Article 29 and Article 30 of the Constitution, guarantees were provided to minorities to set up their own educational institutions, so that they can maintain their own cultural diversity and plurality.
In this classroom in the city of Bangalore, girls are honing their computer skills in the Urdu language.
You know, states are evolving their own systems to accommodate the diversities. It's not that there is a steel frame within which you have to work. For instance, if in one state there are Hindus, there are Muslims, there are Buddhists, there are Sikhs or Christians, there will be an attempt to accommodate everybody in electoral process.
But nowhere is the diversity of India more evident than in its capital. Here in Delhi, you will find every language and cultural community of the country. This Bengali school is in Delhi, but the homeland of the Bengali people is hundreds of kilometers to the east in the state of West Bengal. There are large Bengali communities all over the country. At this school, you get a sense of the complexity of the Indian national identity.
All the students are Bengali over here, so we prefer to speak in Bengali. But since it's an English medium school, so we have to stick to English only. Sometimes we speak in English, sometimes in Bengali, and because this is Delhi, so Hindi being our national language, frequently we speak in Hindi.
One reason federalism is working in India is because the states have significant powers in their own domains and also strong representation in the federal parliament. As well, over time, India has developed strong grassroots institutions of democracy. At this village council meeting, many important local decisions are made. There are thousands of these councils all over India, with millions of council members. This relatively recent addition to India's federal system is an especially important way of including the mass of rural people and women into the political framework.
Nowhere in the world you can see this kind of a plural society. You find all kinds of systems and everything you think you can imagine in the world is here.
Switzerland is one of the oldest federations in the world, dating back more than a century and a half. A small country of only 7 million people, it's also diverse, with 4 language communities: German, French, Italian, and Romansh. Since it became a federal republic in the middle of the 19th century, Switzerland has been one of the most politically stable countries on the planet.
The Swiss people are until now convinced that in such a small country, you see, with 4 languages, with 4 cultures, we couldn't live together peacefully and successfully as we do without being a federalist country.
Switzerland's 26 cantons or half-cantons differ sharply in size, language, economy, and internal politics. These member states of the Swiss Federation are cultural homelands with histories going back centuries. Some cantons are German-speaking, some are French-speaking, and one is Italian. Some are officially bilingual, and the largest canton, Graubünden, is trilingual: German, Italian, and Romansh.
Each Swiss belongs to a canton. I'm feeling that I'm a man from Appenzell, and then I'm a Swiss too. I think that's the big advantage of federalism. It gives you the possibility of multiple identity, and multiple identity really as part of your citizenship.
The cantons of Switzerland are more than simple administrative units. They all have a crucial role to play in the lives of their citizens. The historic town of Freiburg is the capital of the canton of Freiburg. Both French and German-speaking people live here. The canton is officially bilingual.
Et voilà un kilo. 10 et voilà 20. Très bonne journée.
Ce partage, d'avoir aussi la possibilité d'apprendre un peu quelque chose de l'autre culture, ça a vraiment enrichi aussi ma vie. Et c'est aussi un peu ce que Fribourg essaye de faire vivre aussi à tous les autres qui arrivent à Fribourg ou même pour notre population.
As in other cantons, the Freiburg cantonal government has the power to define its own political system and constitution. Freiburg is in charge of its municipalities and raises its own taxes on income.
On y va, maintenant.
Policing is also a cantonal responsibility. These children will go to schools with curriculums defined by the Freiburg government and teachers hired by it.
Blanche. C'est une Mercedes, alors fais attention, elle est chère.
On a reçu un petit enfant d'une année qui devra être monté à l'étage.
Health and social services are also part of the canton's responsibility.
Je peux téléphoner maintenant?
Oui, tu peux appeler, oui.
Si je prends la santé, il y a une loi fédérale, c'est la loi sur l'assurance maladie, qui fixe vraiment un cadre minimal. Cela veut dire tous les citoyens et citoyennes doivent avoir une assurance. Mais après, chaque canton est responsable pour mettre sur pied les structures hospitalières, les structures ambulatoires, de donner les autorisations pour des personnels qui travaillent à titre indépendant. Ça, c'est tout dans la compétence des cantons.
We are really all equal partners, you see. You have not the government of the Confederation that has more influence if each one is equal in the field of his competences.
Wir müssen das einsehen, wir müssen Massnahmen jetzt treffen und nicht warten bis...
The Swiss have a strong belief in citizen participation. Two of the smaller cantons have the tradition of open-air assemblies. Once a year, the citizens of Appenzell and Glarus get together to affirm laws passed by their legislatures.
Danke. Wenn Frau Rosmarie Kaller-Schmidt Stimmen geben, hebe die Hand. Ich erkläre, der Herr Kantonsrichter werden reden.
Bern is the capital of the Swiss Federation. Here, the central government has responsibility for national concerns such as monetary policy, trade, and defense. But the cantons are represented here, too. The Swiss parliament is divided into two houses. The National Council has 200 elected members representing the cantons in proportion to their populations. The Council of States has an equal number of elected members from each canton. So all cantons have real participation in how the country is governed, no matter what their size. Both these houses elect 7 ministers from among their ranks to form the Executive or Federal Council, who direct their federal ministries. All decisions are taken consensually, and the job of president rotates annually. Federalism in Switzerland is designed to be cooperative and participatory between the two levels of government. Consultation procedures are written into the Swiss federal constitution, as is the provision for popular referendums. Any law can be subject to a referendum if 50,000 citizens sign a petition requesting it. Major constitutional changes or international agreements must also pass referendums. Switzerland has a strong national identity that is multilingual, diverse, and highly decentralized.
Alors, comme citoyen, citoyenne, je dois dire, cette multiculturalité, ça c'est une richesse. Et je peux seulement conseiller à tous les pays qui ont encore ces différentes cultures, peut-être sur leur territoire, de le maintenir, de le soigner même, parce que c'est une richesse.
We are always saying we are not a natural nation, because natural nations are made out of language, are made out of religion, but we are a nation made out of our will, of our political will, and by our common institutions to live together.
Belgium is a small country in both size and in population of about 10 million people. But it's rich in the history and culture of its French and Flemish-speaking peoples. Tensions between these two linguistic groups dominated Belgian politics for more than a century.
Following French designs, very centralized and in the hands of an elite which spoke French, regardless of where it came from in the country. Gradually, with democratization, the majority of the population happened to speak Flemish. But this was not reflected in the institutions of the country. So gradually, there were pressures to recognize institutions in Flemish, and that federal or central institutions should reflect the diversity of the country.
And at the same time, another revolution took place in the south of the country, because after the Second World War, it was struck by the economic crisis. And they thought that they could only solve the economic crisis if they had the tools at their own disposal to do something about it. So as a result of different aspirations in the north and in the south of the country was gradually federalized.
The Belgian solution was to divide itself into distinct territories. In the north, Flanders became the home to the country's 6 million Flemish-speaking people. At the same time, in the south, the region of Wallonia became the home for the French-speaking population of about 4 million. Brussels, the country's bilingual capital, became the third region. A small community along the German border has official German-speaking status, although it remains part of the Wallonian region. These linguistic borders have allowed cultural identities to flourish within their regions. In Flanders, the expression of Flemish history and culture imbues the life and economy of the region. The Flemish language is evident everywhere, incorporated into the political and institutional fabric of the territory. If you travel south into Wallonia, Belgium's French cultural and linguistic heritage becomes immediately apparent. Like Flanders, Wallonia has its own capital city, its own institutions, and the territory operates solely in the French language.
€1,20 s'il vous plaît. C'est bien juste. Bonne journée, bon week-end, madame. Au revoir.
The major point of federalism for citizens is to bring some decisions closer to them. If the Flemish and the French want to promote their own educational system, have different interests in culture, that means they can do it because you can decentralize decision making.
Belgium reinforces that decentralization by creating a third level of government that's not territorial, but serves Belgium's linguistic communities.
Things related to territory are dealt with by the regions and the regional governments. Things that relate to people and culture are dealt with by the communities. And then, of course, on top of that, you've got a federal government.
Brussels is Belgium's bilingual capital, and in a way, it's the glue that holds the federation together.
En jaune, comme ça on voit que c'est de l'or. Il a sa pièce d'or. Ça c'est une, avec un tiers du sac.
This French school in Brussels is administered by the Francophone Community Government, which governs French education in Wallonia too.
C'est tout un sac de noisettes.
Super, Julie.
U kunnen verstaan. En wat is nog belangrijk?
And Flemish schools like this one are governed by the Flemish Community Government.
Gebouwde schaapskooi, uitgemest en gooit hooi in de donkere ruimte.
All levels of government and regions of the country come together here in the Belgian Parliament to share the powers and responsibilities that make the country work.
Dan in de feiten wel is. Gij doet alsof hij afwezig is.
Heeft de vraag niet gehoord, is binnengekomen als de vraag gesteld was.
This is a country committed to democracy. That's the base, and the respect for human rights and peace. These are fundamental. You can build any kinds of institutions, but unless you've got a commitment to basic principles of respect for others, it's very difficult to make them work.
À deux questions des membres flamands de l'opposition et ne pas vouloir être là quand des membres francophones le questionnent, c'est inadmissible.
To make major changes, you need consensus. And this is, I would say, a protection against oppression, against abuse of power. Doesn't mean there are no power games. I mean, obviously there are. But basically, there's a strong commitment to respect the process and to talk about problems and to try to resolve them.
People are very realistic. So as long as that Belgian state structure is able to solve problems, Belgium will stay as a country as it is today.
Spain has the largest territory of Western Europe and has a population of 40 million. Spanish is the national language, but there are a number of other language and cultural groups here, including Basque, Catalan, and Galician. For nearly 40 years, the Spanish lived under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco. After his death in 1975, the Spanish people went to work to give themselves a new democratic constitution.
So after Franco's death, there was a general assumption that only with the federal, or in general terms with a decentralized system, could we have a democracy, because Franco's dictatorship had been really centralized.
The 1978 Constitution made provisions for regions to assume a large measure of control over their own affairs, to become autonomous communities within Spain.
Y para debatir con los grupos parlamentarios la situación de nuestro país.
And it provided the recipe for regions to assume that autonomy if they chose to.
Se suspende la sesión que se reanudará mañana a las 4 de la tarde.
If you want to be an autonomous community, you can do that, and you have to follow this process. Our constitution was more an option of a process.
The Spanish model has been important as a first step because it's political transition. I think it's a model how an authoritarian role can become a democratic regime without having important struggles, injuries, deaths, etc.
This allowed regions where there were distinct communities to have power to enhance their language and cultures. The Basque Country in the north and the Catalan region in the east were the first to become autonomous regions within Spain. Barcelona is the capital of Catalonia. Since 1978, the region has experienced a cultural renaissance.
Els llamantos, aquest breu són? El d'aquí a 38 i el de fora a 22.
I feel Catalan, but when I travel or when I go to another country, my passport said that I am Spanish. It is not a problem for me. I think it was very good for Catalan people and for Catalan language because first of all, we have recognition, political recognition. It was the Statute of Autonomy. It was approved in 1978, and the Catalan government was reestablished. Hola, Carla.
Hola, bon dia, Mercè.
Tenim aquest dossier, que ara me l'estava mirant i m'ha semblat que faltava... Now we have Catalan television, Catalan radios, and Catalan books, and every cultural items, we have it in Catalan.
The Basque Country has deep historical roots. The language itself is completely distinct and bears no relationship to Spanish or other Western European languages. The Basque territory has a greater degree of self-government than any other autonomous region in Spain.
Not only they collect the taxes, they establish the taxes, they set the rates, they set the tax credits, they have their own taxation system.
In the world of federal countries, this is an almost unique procedure of doing things, a sign of a large degree of autonomy for the Basque people. However, for a very small but vocal minority, that is not enough. These demonstrators are part of the radical 8% who will not be satisfied with anything but complete independence. This is a peaceful demonstration, but terrorist activity still occurs.
Lo que pasa es que es un grupo muy compacto, es un grupo muy fiel a sus ideas y es un grupo muy poco permeable. Es un grupo con una mentalidad muy poco democrática, con una mentalidad muy franquista, si vale.
Despite the actions of this small minority, daily life is very peaceful. The region is not only one of the most beautiful, it is one of the most prosperous of Spain. Basque culture and language are thriving, and the younger generation can still hope to get past the rancor of an earlier time.
The hope is, of course, peace, end of terrorism, that's clear, and that the difference that our parents see right now in the society or between the people, that I don't see it in the future. That I can find people of my age and I can talk openly, and we don't have these kind of differences that are old, that come from elder generations.
The system that gave birth to autonomy to the Basques and Catalans now sees 17 autonomous communities covering all of Spain. But these regions don't all function in the same way. This asymmetrical model is the particular Spanish contribution to federalism.
In countries that are very diverse, to establish very homogeneous models, very symmetrical models, don't work very well. To establish a set of different political powers within a constitutional framework is a model that can work.
Canada is vast in size, extending across 6 time zones. It's diverse both in geography and its peoples. With a population of 31 million stretching mostly along its southern border, Canada has developed an economy that makes it a leader among industrialized nations. Canada became a federation in the 19th century. What were primarily English-speaking Ontario and French-speaking Quebec were joined by other British colonies and territories to form modern Canada. Historically, the Canadian Federation was most influenced by the relationship between its 2 founding communities, the English and the French.
That notion of people living together who are not homogeneous, where there are collective identities that had to share the same political space and find a way of getting along, has deep, deep roots in our history.
Canada's 10 provinces have a great deal of autonomy. The Constitution gives them control over 16 vital areas such as health, natural resources, and education.
Probability of spinning a 6, say you? Oh.
As in many other federations, the provinces establish their own language policies. At the federal level, English and French have equal status in all public services, in the workplace, and in Parliament.
We must ensure that the North has greater control of its destiny. We must ensure that the people of Quebec recognize themselves within Canada. And we must ensure that Ontarians see their ambitions fulfilled.
Un fier Québécois, un fier Canadien français et un fier Canadien petit.
Quebec is the vibrant heart of French culture in North America. There are 7 million French speakers in the province today, about a quarter of Canada's population. But as late as the 1950s, the language of business and many services in Quebec was English, as was the economic power base. This started.
Mes parents viennent du Maroc. Mon père vient du Canada et ma mère vient de l'Écosse.
In addition to French schools being available to French-speaking students across the country, there are also wonderful programs to help youngsters who aren't francophones learn French.
This French immersion school in the western province of Alberta is 2 time zones away from Quebec and the heart of French culture in Canada. But here, English-speaking children spend most of their school day speaking French. These children and their parents consider the French language and culture to be part of their identity as Canadians.
So they're developing a capacity to speak French, to understand the other main linguistic community in Canada. And that's, I think, a very good example of something that Canada has pioneered, French immersion, and that is working very well to help the 2 linguistic communities understand one another.
Ça n'a pas été facile de concilier les intérêts de toutes les provinces et protéger aussi les intérêts du gouvernement central. Mais sa pratique, après 20 ans, nous amène à croire qu'elle a été un élément très positif dans l'évolution de la Fédération canadienne, dans le droit des minorités et dans le sentiment des Canadiens comme Canadiens.
Indigenous peoples of Canada were here before either the French or the English arrived, but they are still struggling for full recognition as founding peoples.
You've primarily got three major indigenous groups in Canada. The Inuit in the far north, the Métis that are spread primarily through Ontario to Western Canada, and First Nations populations. And within that you've got over 50 unique languages, with about 630 or so First Nations communities spread from sea to sea to sea.
In its early days, the Canadian government made Indigenous peoples wards of the state. Over time, their traditional land-based economies were seriously weakened, and their living standards today are far below the Canadian norm.
And so the struggle that we've had since then is trying to break this whole cycle of dependence on the federal government so that we can make a contribution not only to our own betterment, but to Canada's betterment.
Across the country, Canada's Indigenous peoples have been negotiating with the federal government for more genuine self-government. They want control over matters such as justice, education, and land and resources.
I can support the province of Manitoba. I'm the Grand Chief that are sitting up front.
And that's not only a challenge for Canada, but a lot of other federalist countries within the Americas and indeed globally.
Federalism has faced many challenges in Canada, including efforts to amend the Constitution, separation referendums, and rising Aboriginal aspirations. But Canadian federalism is resilient. It has the ability to adapt and evolve.
Paradoxically, we started out as a highly centralized federation, and with the passage of time, we have become a highly decentralized federation. And yet we are prosperous, and there's a sense of national identity and affiliation, a degree of patriotism and so on. And the country seems to work.
Federalism is not a panacea. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution to every political problem in the world. But the experience of federal countries is really worth looking at. In the post-September 11th world, we hear a lot about nation building, and we understand how security, human rights, issues about governance and democracy are really going to be critical in allowing people from different backgrounds, different religions, different walks of life and ways of life to live together. A few years ago, we might have said that there were only a handful of federal countries, and it seemed like a system that was really only fitted for a few. But now I think we're beginning to understand that if we want to create more democratic institutions in the future, if we want to create a world where people can in fact live together and work together, recognizing their diversity, federalism is something that has to be more widely and deeply understood. It's part of the expansion of democracy and human rights in the 21st century.